Vince, welcome back to the show.
Good morning. How are you, ladies?
We're good. We're better because you're
Glad
here.
you're here. And Vince, we wanted to talk a little bit about aggression with our kids because it came up in the last hour. We all have had experiences where our children are aggressive, and actually Wyatt was aggressive the other night with me. He had a meltdown and was aggressive and grabbed my arms and scratched me. And of course, I was trying not to give it any attention, but he's big now and it's hard to control him. So we wanted to talk to you about steps that parents need to take when their children get aggressive so you can help out with that.
Sure. I think the first thing that we always want to know is when the child either has a history of aggression or maybe this is a new behavior and they just started aggression, that we're collaborating very closely with your BCBA or your supervisor of your program, because usually if it's a new behavior, they're going to develop a behavior intervention plan that's going to involve a specific set of skills, interventions that you're going to need, not only the parents but the staff as well, on how to best properly work with that behavior, right? So you as a parent are also going to need to get trained just as a therapist on how to deal with those behaviors, because oftentimes they have different functions. The behaviors might be a little bit more random or intermittent, and we don't know, unfortunately, we don't know exactly when they're going to happen. So we want to make sure that all the parents have the interventions, in their little sack of tricks and interventions, so that when it does, that you as a parent will then respond the same way a therapist would if it happened in session. So that collaboration with the supervisor and the full team is essential, so that you will have the same techniques, you will have the same interventions, and sometimes in high intensity situations, you'll have the right materials and equipment to be able to work through the behaviors appropriately.
Okay. And so within the CARD family, you would have a supervisor, and if you got hit or bit or scratched, you would want to fairly immediately, not even waiting for the next clinic, to notify the supervisor. And that trips a whole bunch of different things, but there is probably somebody, an assaultive behavior management person in your office who then will, and Vince, you can speak more eloquently to this than I can, but with these kinds of behaviors, there are so many different variables, like the age of the child,
right,
what was happening beforehand. So you don't just have the assaultive behavior management show you what to do, because they don't know your child. They consult with your supervisor, come up with a plan, and then the supervisor trains you and implements you, which is a really effective way of doing it because it's just tailored to your kid. So that's with CARD, but the parent really has to tell people. I think that's the only thing that always, Vince and I talk about this, makes me squeamish, because so often we don't want to.
Right.
Or we don't think to.
We're ashamed or embarrassed by it.
Thank you.
We don't want to just brush it under the rug.
Well, and we don't want people to look at our kid like he's a monster.
Right.
We don't want people to be afraid of them. So if it's going to the people who work with them, we don't want to have them be like, oh, what if he scratches me, right? And I always felt when my son was engaged in these behaviors, I felt like it was my fault, that I'd done something wrong, and that if I went and told them, they were just going to point out to me what I had done wrong.
Right.
And after you're already feeling beat up, who wants to hear that you're wrong? So, but you do have to say something. You got to trip the wire. That's what happens at CARD. Now, Vince, I want you to take just a second, though, to talk about, for families who don't have the benefit of being with CARD, that don't already have that system set up. If you're not even getting ABA services and you're at home and your child hits you, what do they do?
The first thing with anything is, anything behaviorally, is we want to be able to, as a parent, try to figure out what the function of the behavior is. Why did the child do it, right? Don't focus as much on the behavior yet. Focus on what the function is. Did he do it to get out of something? Did he do it to try to attain something? Was he doing it because that they were getting some type of attention for it, right? That maybe you were engaged in something else and they were getting the attention for this. We need to find that function out, because that's how we can then develop what to do for it, right? You had mentioned earlier, we don't want to give them attention, right? Well, if it's not attention maintained, then giving them attention is neither here nor there. We don't want to give them that maybe they're doing it to attain something. We want to make sure they don't attain that. So as soon as we kind of understand why they're doing it, and we don't need the behavioral terms, we don't need all the funky and fancy, behavioral terminology. He wants something, he's trying to get something, he's trying to get attention, or, then we know, okay, so now we know when something is going to come up that he might want to grab for something. Then we can then prepare ourselves by either, talking to them beforehand, maybe an antecedent modification. Maybe we can do something like prepare them for a transition that's coming up, so that doesn't turn into a behavior. We might then maybe give them like a reward system, set up a reward system. If they do this behavior, then they'll get something to reduce the behavior. Or if we know the behavior and then the behavior still happens, we know how to consequence, meaning that we're not going to give them something if that's what they're trying to do. We're not going to continue to give them a lot of attention if that's what the function of the behavior is. We're not going to let them get out of something, right? We're not going to take a task away if that's what it is. So soon as we're able to understand that concrete information, then we're a little bit more prepared when it comes up. We know what the function is for it. Now, when it comes to the behavior, that's a little too vague, because it could be hitting, it could be kicking, it could be scratching, pulling, pinching, those types of things. But put yourself in, if you know where the function is or what they're going to do, you can put yourself in a safer spot to be able to either redirect a behavior, maybe block a behavior, because you now know where it's generating from, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
in a nutshell, if you can figure out what it was that they wanted, what we want to do is not give them that, whatever it was. Is that in a nutshell?
That's the first part, and then now you know where it's coming from. So in situations that the child's going to want to continue to play their Xbox, or they're going to want to grab a cookie off the counter, you're going to know that could lead into an aggressive behavior if we deny that. So now we can put ourselves in a safer position, right? So that we can block ourselves when we deny it, because again, you're going to deny it. You're not going to let the child just have a cookie whenever they want it, or you're not going to let them play Xbox for, 24 hours a day. There is going to be, at some point, you're going to withdraw and you're going to have to stop these activities, but you know that by removal of that is going to, or has in the past, caused a behavior. So now you can put yourself in a position where you're able to protect yourself. You're a little bit more aware. You're a little bit safer, maybe back towards the door, so you can retreat out the door if something happens. But the main thing you want to do is make sure that behavior is not functional, meaning that it does not get the desired response that the child's trying to get, right? So not only you're protecting yourself, but you also want to make sure that the child is not going to attain something by using that behavior, or get the attention by using that behavior, or get out of something by using that behavior. Because then what we've done, while we might have protected ourselves right in that incident, we've actually reinforced the behavior, which means we're increasing the probability it's going to continue.
Might we see the aggression, though, escalate if we're not giving them what they want?
Initially, yeah. And initially, that would actually be what we would anticipate. And I think that too scares families, right? That scares parents, that scares caregivers. We see the behavior escalate, so we immediately think that what we're doing is wrong because the behavior is getting worse. But in all actuality, what we're doing is right when the behavior starts to increase initially. Because what's happening is the child is escalating it because they're trying to, again, assert that behavior to be successful, to make it functional. So they're going to try a little harder, they're going to try a little louder, they're going to try a little bit with more intensity. We call that an extinction burst, which means we're now manipulating the behavior to change it, so they're going to increase that behavior in efforts to try to have it be successful. We stick to our guns, we protect ourselves, we continue to not let them have access to it, it will drop back down. Okay. And it will then be able to change. But I think that's a very good point, Nancy, is that if the behavior initially escalates, stick with it. You're doing the right thing, the behavior is actually changing, and that's a good sign.
Okay. Right.
Hard stuff, though. There's a
is
whole
hard.
mental component to this, Vince, and
Sure.
and I'd love it if you would talk a little bit about that mental component, because it's very easy to get upside down. I know when it was happening to me, I got upside down. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like maybe I deserved it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I should hide it, because it was my fault. And I have heard other moms say that, and it breaks my heart, because you know what? When another mom says that, I can see in them, I'm like, there's no way this is your fault. It's not your fault. But when it was me, you couldn't have convinced me of that.
Right. And I think and it's hard to do this, and it's going to sound easy through words, but it's actually very, very difficult as a parent to disconnect emotionally from your child. And this is why what I was saying earlier is extremely important. If you are now focused more on the behavior, and you're focused on the function of the behavior, and you're focused on how to put yourself in a safe position, right? You're now thinking about this more behaviorally. You're thinking about this more as a therapist, a clinician, and you're emotionally detaching yourself from, did I do something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Am I making this worse? Am I a bad, mother, father, grandmother, what have you, right? We have to do what we can to cognitively shift it from here to up here, right? We have to move it from our emotional responses to our cognitive responses. And that's why if we're focusing on the behaviors, we're focusing on the function of the behaviors, we're again, if you have a behavior plan that you're following it, if you don't, you're putting yourself in a safe situation. But that's going to help give you the confidence that you're doing the right thing. And now you're thinking through things more logically. You're responding more logically to this. It's like, okay, he's doing it for this. It's not about me. He's not doing this because he's naughty. He's not doing this because he doesn't like me. He's not doing this because he hates me as a parent. He's doing this because he wants his Xbox for the next 24 hours. And he's using this behavior to get it. He cannot use this behavior to get it, so we're going to go ahead and stop this behavior, work on him using his language, work on him being able to be more flexible with transitions, those types of things. So again, it sounds easier on paper than it is in all actuality, but we want to concentrate on the techniques to help break or to separate some of that emotional responsiveness that we have when our kids do things.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the idea that there's an element of self-talk here, because there is self-talk happening. My self-talk was, I'm a bad parent.
Mm-hmm.
I suck. If I'd done this right, this wouldn't be happening, that whole thing. And I will say that one of the things that was really most effective with me is that when they gave me, it's just the same thing we do with our kids. When they gave me an alternative behavior, and my behavior was that I had to become the scientist and take, like, in my head pictures of what was happening so that I could describe it to them later on.
Mm-hmm.
I have the little sheet, the ABC sheet that we've done here before on the show, where I was, they call it the topography of the behavior, but I was being like a clinician and thinking, okay, well, now he's throwing things and now he's doing this, whatever. It took some of that, and I'm a bad parent judgment off, because I had something else to do.
Right.
There were other times when therapists, the first time that somebody really helped me to understand what was happening and how to do planned ignoring, he kept giving me tasks to do. First he had me water all the plants in the house. And I was like, my kid is completely freaking out
right.
and trying to pull my pants off,
Right.
and just like completely losing his mind. And you want me to water the plants? And he was like, yep, we've made the area safe. He's safe. You're safe. Water the plants. And it was really hard for me, but he kept talking to me, and then he had me dust the television, and then he had me go through the mail. But he was there with me talking through the whole thing. And the first time that my son appropriately tried to get my attention, this therapist said to me, very young therapist, said to me, now pay attention to him. and talked me through the whole thing. I can tell you that if I'd been trying to do it by myself, there's no way I would have made it.
Right.
There's no way I would have made it.
Yeah.
At about 20 minutes into the tantrum, I was losing my mind. I was crying and laughing at the same time. I turned to this 19-year-old therapist and said, I think I'm going to wet my pants. It was so stressful.
Right.
And he kept saying to me, you're doing great, you're doing great. And, he said, and I'm timing it, and it's been 20 minutes. And he's getting tired. You're tired, but he's getting tired. If you just hang out a few more minutes, I think this behavior is going to stop. And it really was the last time he did that behavior. So, the value of having professionals work through this with you cannot be understated. Am I right, Vince?
Correct. And I think that collaboration, coaching, mentoring, the reinforcement that you were getting. I don't think, the therapist was telling you anything that you didn't already know logically when it was explained to you, but it was that emotional reinforcement, that positive regard that you were getting to continue what you were doing. And you had mentioned something that that made me trigger a thought as well, right? It's almost, sometimes for those of us who are very competitive, it's like a little competition. Oh, no, I'm not going to let you win this.
Right.
I got this one. Right now we're building our self-confidence as parents. Oh, no. I got this one. I'm doing the right thing.
That confidence. Yeah.
So then our confidence boosts up, because not only we're getting the reinforcement that we know we're doing the right thing, but now you're like, okay, well, now it's a little bit of a game, right? And then we're going to try to do this, because because as a parent, we do what's right, not what always makes our children happy. And this is regardless of disability, right? I know all parents do things for their children, or have rules and regulations and policy procedure, instructions for our kids that don't make them happy. But we know we're doing it because it's leading them the right way. This is no different.
Exactly. I always go back to the example that somebody gave me about when our kids are learning to walk, and how there's that scary little moment that they fall down and they hit their head on the corner of the coffee table, or they fall down 2 stairs when they're learning stairs, and we don't say, well, that's it.
Right.
We're done with that. Fit him with a wheelchair because this is scary, this is hard, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
But we don't do that because we know what the outcome is. And we know that it's a phase, that they're going to move through it, they're going to be okay, we're going to be okay, and that it just has to be gotten through, and it's what's good for them. I think if we can get the word out to parents to say, you don't just accept if a child is being abusive to you, that it can be a phase that's gotten through when you work on it with the proper thing. I think knowing that is powerful.
Yes.